this ever happen to you? You decide to divert your depressing, dreary day and drop into a delightful game of Dustbowl. Dreadfully though, you decide to play Dustbowl. You dumb dolt. Dustbowl? Really? That derelict dysfunctional dribble? Come on. And you type in the chat, Choke Point Town, USA, but with zeros instead of O's. And now it's also in China somehow. But why? Before we can ask the question, what makes a map bad, or in this case terrible, we must first ask, what makes a map good? Now, people obviously have their subjective take on what maps are good and what are bad, but there are several key components that Valve themselves tries to keep in check when making and producing official maps. Primarily, open spaces with little complexity. These are where the larger battles are meant to happen and should be placed in areas near the objective. It's important to keep in mind the sheer size of the area people are fighting in and how many people are meant to actually be in there. An example of this done well would be Mountain Lab. All of these spots here are large enough to support the fights that are expected to take place in them. Flank routes. Obviously, you can't have all players clumped in one single spot in a massive mosh pit. You need flank routes to get behind the enemy and ambush them. This sounds obvious, because it is. These flanks should also be placed as an alternative to taking the straight main path, and should usually come at the cost of time, maybe even a lack of resources like ammo or health. The second stage of Egypt rings some bells on how this is done well and proper. And finally, we have the most important aspect of the map when designing a class-based shooter. Making the map designed for the classes. You would seriously think this stuff would be more obvious than the stuff they tell you in health and safety PSAs. Heat is hot. Knives are sharp. Snipers need decent far sight lines. Scout and spies need flank routes. Wear proper safety equipment. Soldier and demos need high ceilings to rocket jump. Gravel Pit is an extremely well designed and developed map which checks off all of these boxes. These are the three core foundations on which each and every map is built upon. And Dustbowl passes none of them. Dustbowl is a 3-stage attack and defend map, where the first point of the map gets capped in a minute, and the second point gets capped in 20. I could go on and simply state the obvious, like how Dustbowl doesn't have any good flanks, incredibly tight corridors which allow for limited mobility, and this tunnel. Fuck this tunnel in particular. But I think a more in-depth section by section is truly needed to understand what makes Dustbowl so... Dustbowl. I mean, did you really think I was gonna let Dustbowl, of all things, get off the hook easy? I like Whatville more than I like Dustbowl.
Disclaimer, does not actually like Whatville more than Dustbowl.
Did you know Dustbowl is the only map in the entire game that allows you to directly shoot into the enemy spawn? Guess that isn't really fun, having rockets and pills being spammed right down where you spawn in, but at least the resupply cabinet can't... Oh. It's literally right in front of the doorway. Huh. We haven't even left the spawn room and we've already ran into our first issue of Dustbowl, being this spawn room. You have a 100% chance that there will be a soldier or demo with a crits medic standing and spamming down this door, usually with 4 other players trying to fight them off. This is the most direct pathway to the first cap after all, and believe it or not, spawn camping does actually have some merit in a game like TF2. It's a way to secure kills and delay the enemy at great risk for yourself. It's typically why spawn camping on other maps doesn't last too long. It's annoying, but it's risky. Except on Dustbowl, because for some reason, Valve thought it was a good idea to place this little shed here. This shed may seem innocent enough at first, but in reality, it greatly adds to the difficulty. The red team gains the high ground while standing on top of it, allowing for them to spam spawn from a fairly safe place. Only thing preventing this is a hard Uber push right outside of spawn or a sniper on the other spawn exit. But what makes this even worse is the full health pack right inside this shed. Who thought it was a good idea to place full health right outside a spawn door, thus persisting the amount of spawn camping? Seriously, Dustbowl has an excessive amount of full health packs. Most normal maps have at best 2 of them, with a majority of the maps coping out to have a number of 0 full health packs. Dustbowl, though, has 10 of them. It has more full health packs than large ones, which would be fine and dandy if they were placed somewhere balanced. Swiftwater, for example, has full health packs in flanking locations, meaning the defenders would have to stop focusing on the cart to get health, and attackers have to loosen up their assault and push. Both allow for either team to make a counter push while the other gets health, as opposed to being right in front of the enemy's spawn to allow spawn camping. But then again, that's just one exit, right? We still have 2 other ones to go over. Let's go to the other side of the map and... Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. What did I just say? What did I... Oh, fuck. I suppose the benefit of this one, however, is that you can't shoot directly into spawn, just the opening here. Obviously, this is supposed to be Valve's definition of the perfect flank. Other flanks in the game, they cost time and usually make you end up somewhere the enemy isn't expecting. But this flank, oh no, takes you directly to where the enemy is expecting you and is just a big open field of no cover. And here we have this final exit. People rarely ever take this spot because it's identical to going through the other two doors, but with the added disadvantage of restricting mobility. You'll often see snipers standing in this doorway here since it's the only spot they can stand without worry from enemies. Taking a look at the first cap itself, do you recall when I mentioned how Valve intended to create large open spaces to fight in? They forgot that point here. Seriously, I've had more breathing room in elevators than this. Thankfully though, the second point of Dustbowl is slightly better than the first one. This tunnel here with the one-way door is where most attackers will be due to how engineers always seem to set up in here. This one-way door allows for the enemy team to feel safe and prepared setting up while also preventing escape if things do go bad for them. Unfortunately, it's really impossible to actually weed out the nest as a defender due to the lengths you have to go to properly get into the area. Once again, we designed open spaces to contain most players. On the opposite side, we have this bridge section here with this platform leading down to a health pack and another open room. This right here is the good part of the first section. The ceiling in this spot is high enough to allow people on red to jump up on the platform freely and attack anyone harassing the point. People can also go through the middle point here, but I don't recommend it, and despite the fact that Dustbowl is known for its tight and narrow spots, this odd room always felt extremely spacious to me. This section of the map gets a gold star. Congrats. Unfortunately, we now move on to the cap. It's slightly better than the first point due to the giant opening here, but it loses some merit on how a sentry can completely lock it down. The flank stairs here become nearly unusable if the sentry is placed here, meaning people have to attack the point head on, running into the second sentry spot, which is usually here. Thankfully, this sentry can be destroyed via the platform above it. Once again, the best spot on the map, and it's getting one more golden star. It's just that good. Finally, we have this spot here at red spawn, the only place where snipers stand to snipe the other sniper in the tunnels. This whole section of the map feels really unneeded and tacked on, from this giant open space which is only ever used by found out spies, to the small health and ammo pack up here that blue will never see. Bit more cost effective to just run back into spawn for full health and ammo if you're sniping here, than just wait for this to heal you. The problem with this section of the map comes with this flank here. Because it's such a safe place for engineers to set up shop and sell their telewares along with teddy bears, you'll have a cluster of players breach this door trying to push out into this extremely small area. If they decide to go down to the point, they'll be met with a sentry that can only be destroyed by teamwork and communication, which isn't happening because we're talking about casual here, or, much more likely, an Uber push. Issue with that afterwards is dealing with the second sentry that will typically be placed here, and that red team flooding back into the point due to the large entrance here. Still, it isn't extremely horrible yet. We're only 1/3 of the way to go. Moving on to stage 2. Immediately we run into the exact same issue as the last spawn section, albeit not as bad. The ground here demands that blue team peek their heads up and out, meaning pills, rockets, and arrows easily travel down and into this trench. If you thought the trenches during World War I were bad, this one takes a proverbial cake when Juan Jose's 2009 realizes he can just use the flog and rushes into the mix too. The benefit, however, is the second spawn door disallows spam to a certain degree due to how the walls are angled here. People can't spam from safety anymore, they have to be within this gate section here. Walking out of spawn provides us with this little building here, overlooking blue spawn, with soldiers, demos, and even heavies always being on it. Complete with not one, but 2 full ammo and health packs? I'm sorry, but is this a repeat episode? Didn't I already mention why the defenders getting priority to health kits is bad? Right outside of spawn, in an even more defensible location? This section is even worse, however, due to the sheer size of it. You could easily maneuver around the small shed outside of blue spawn on stage 1, but now you gotta take a stroll or not done yet, all the way to the other side to reach your now full health attacker, assuming you didn't get picked off from the roof first. Conversely speaking, if blue somehow does manage to push up to this building and has successfully been living in it rent-free, well, you aren't going to be holding on to that first cap for much longer. Speaking of, this side route here is a typical death sentence while attacking, and a free frag feast for offenders. For real, don't go down here. If another person doesn't kill you, the sentry on the corner inside the building will. Speaking of this building, recall that thing I said about Valve designing open spaces being the focus for combat, not a literal shanty old shack? I know I sound like a broken record, but good god, the amount of fighting that occurs in the basement of this building make Fight Club blush. Oh shit, the first roll. Finally, we have this building here. I never truly understood why it's so large, to be honest. You can go behind it as a flank, I guess, but with the way the map works, the only one who benefits from this is Spy during the first few minutes of the round. After the first point is capped, the red team has difficulty pushing up past the tunnel entrances, and the other classes of the blue team would just be walking away from the point. What is the point? I suppose it gives the red team a little bit of a cover when crossing over, in addition to being a good spot for health packs and teleporters, but once again, very large, no real purpose. This is really just an inverse of the last section's second point, but somehow done even worse. The one-way door present last match has moved over here now, into a much tighter hallway with 2 large health packs on it. This corner here is where a majority of the fighting is going to take place. Red needs to prevent people coming down this hallway, and blue needs to get control of this overhang to deal with sentries down below. On the opposite side, we have this small open area, which also promotes fighting. This corner section here is ideal for pill and sticky spam on either sides. Oh, and also have fun playing Spy or Scout here, because there isn't any way to get behind the enemy team or around them. As for sniping, I guess you can hang back here as well though. Not much of a sightline. The spawn point to the cap is also ridiculously close, with only a chain link fence that you can jump over to really delay the time reaching it. If you manage to fight your way here on attack, you'll always have to deal with one final push from the people walking out of spawn. If you're lucky, it's just one light class like an engineer without a sentry. If you're unlucky though, yeah, time to play the map for an additional 7 minutes. Despite the fact that this is right beside spawn and is the main cap, look how many people are cluttered into this area. Ridiculous. Here we are on the third and final stage of Dustbowl. Can you feel it? The excitement, the pain, the suffering, almost all of it for nothing. Here we go. The spawn area here is a tight mess that Flog Pyros just love to use along with heavies. If red can somehow push you back into this section here, well, the game's already over. These 2 main entrances are a safeguard if you can reach the wall. This flank route here though is more or less a death sentence at the start of the round. It leads you directly out to the main battleground and in the crossfire, with no cover. Red spawn also directly leads to the second most defensible location on this map by this drop off here, being this corner. Pushing out of spawn to the actual point, and welcome to hell! Sorry, let me clarify.
True hell.
This area. This bleak and desolate wasteland where boys become men, the king of defensive areas. This entire section is a game of tug and war. Red holds it, blue pushes a little, red holds this corner, forcing blue back a bit, and the process repeats, and that's just if there is only one sentry in that spot. Haven't even discussed the issues of a sentry being on the opposite side. There are no flanks. There isn't a sightline. It's just a field and a corner, and both teams are fighting tooth and nail to push each other back. Just you and the desolate and bitter fighting of war. But what is the king of defensive areas? To a god of defensive areas, perish puny and insignificant player, and witness the might, the power, the stalemate and solitude
Of the second cap.
This is yet again another hallway with albeit one technical flank, which is undeniably the worst one in the fucking game. The main path is this tight and narrow pathway with the only easy accessible and true flank being this even tighter and narrower hallway. This is without a doubt my least favorite map section in all of TF2. This flank really is just a death sentence for the blue team. It's extremely tight and narrow, and these pillars don't help due to their shitty collision. Coming out of this spot usually has you face to face with either a sentry here or on the platform above you. If you aren't playing Soldier or Demo, the only way to go up is this staircase here. Right back on the main path with no cover. Conversely, the red team can't use the tunnel to attack from behind due to the sheer amount of enemies and sentries that build up here. They may get a pick or two, but they aren't likely to do much more than that. Speaking of choke points, here comes the most iconic and most defensible one in the entire game. Blue sets up here, occasionally making trips to the building on the opposite side, followed by red doing the same thing. Occasionally, blue takes a sentry nest on the left building, either through uber or luck, and they can't hold it due to people respawning. Gets sent back to the corner, and we got 15 minutes in the match. The main issue with this final point here is how extremely limited you are to approaching it. There is only 2 ways to get to the point. Cross this bridge section here, right out in the open, directly in front of 2 enemy spawns with several spots behind you for the enemy team to stand. And the other way is this extremely small 5x5 cube you can stand in over here by dropping down, assuming you didn't get picked off trying to walk over to it. Scouts and spies are nearly useless in this section due to how tight everything is, restricting their ability to move around. Snipers have a decent sight line but are prone to constant harassment and flinching, and the engineers, well, what is there to really say about the engineers? Even soldiers and demos have difficulty in this spot due to how far back they can safely take pot shots without being shredded. This results in demos needing to charge their stickies for range, or soldiers to rocket jump off the back wall here. Heavy stands an okay chance, but their lack of mobility makes retreating impossible if it gets too much. Which, this last point on Dustbowl is going to get too much. Pyro, who has done fairly well due to how tight and close the map has been for the most part, completely drops off at this last section here because, once again, it's just a straight hallway. You can't get into range or flank to deal damage with the flamethrower, so you have to spam the squirt shot. I'm not proud of myself for having to admit that you have to do that, but you have to do that. And of course, that leaves us with medic. If you noticed, I haven't really discussed what a push means all that much. In fact, I've only said Uber 3 times so far. Well, I guess 4 now. Uber has and always will be a game changer when it's used. It allows teams to make a massive push in their favor, either offensively to push forward or defensively to push back. And although Uber is a powerful tool and should be utilized, it should never feel as forced and necessary as it does within TF2. Now, I do understand that the T in TF2 stands for team and not T, but people should still have the freedom to choose what class they want to play as and still have a decent chance at success. There should be a learning curve in the game telling you what class your team needs, while also not forcing you to exclusively play that class. Something I think Dustbowl fails at. Part of that stems to how the map is designed to pretty much make classes like Sniper, Scout, Spy, and occasionally Pyro to be non-existent.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye.
Resulting in the specific need and call for other classes. Now, obviously, people are already going to say, well duh, that's how maps work. A Pyro wouldn't be a good in an open map, and a Sniper wouldn't be good in a tight corner. But the difference between a good map and a bad map is that a good map will still allow those classes to exist in some way. I just repeated my point from the start. Holy shit, I'm becoming a better writer. Look at the way I've grown. And look at the way TF2 has grown. Dustbowl has been out since the launch of TF2. Technically, even before it, since it was also around in Team Fortress Classic as well. And yet, the game has clearly evolved and changed, past the point to what Valve originally had planned for the map. It's hard to imagine the game at launch, at a time before Pyro had Air Blast, or Engineer could pick up and move his own buildings. Hell, level 3 dispensers and teleporters didn't even exist until a year after release. Dustbowl in the past felt like a game much more focused on taking out the medic before you could make a push and instantly win the game. But now, with Air Blast completely shutting that down, engineers being able to move buildings before they can be destroyed, and the hundreds of new weapons that were added, Dustbowl clearly hasn't evolved well enough to what modern TF2 needs. And yet, I played several hours of it for this video, as I'm sure thousands of others are playing it right now. This cosmic anomaly that is Dustbowl. A map that everyone agrees upon is a choke point mess filled with spam. A map that is so universally hated, and yet so universally played and enjoyed. It's the 3rd most played map according to Teamwork.tf, and yet it's the first map that comes to mind for hate. Why though? Is it some odd sense of nostalgia of a time more simple, before bots, before the squirt shot, before Father Gaiman abandoned us? Why are we here? Just to suffer? A coping mechanism for denial, an excuse to not move on and experience change in reality? Is it some sick, twisted goal to try and prove oneself? To suffer, so we may look back and feel proud of ourselves? Despite how dirty and dusty the bowl is, we cannot climb out of it. We get close to the rim of the bowl, only to slide all the way back down into the middle of it, and we repeat the cycle over and over and over again. Until we get bored and play fucking Turbine.